Hello, everyone. We're going to give everybody time to pop in here on the Zoom. Give it about probably 30 seconds before we get started. Want to thank you guys all for being here today. Feel free to turn your cameras on if you so wish. I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone for the beginning of this at least, but then as we all pop in, just to review, this is a so this is, in other words, meant for real estate agents across the country, across the US, from everywhere, every background, all aspects. We will be probably talking about some things that are maybe sometimes state or local specific, things that maybe don't pertain to you at your brokerage. But what I wanted to offer to you today is we are all kind of in a state of chaos. This obviously threw us all for a loop on Friday. I don't think any of us knew this was coming. If you don't already have it, I would love for you as an industry professional to download the full 108-page document. Maybe you don't want to burn up your printer and ruin the environment and print it out, but you can at least have that resource for yourself, so that you've got that in front of you. I think that's a smart move. If you don't have access to that from your brokerage, I'm going to go ahead and put in the link. This is case sensitive. This is a bit.ly link, bit.ly/NAR settlement. Oh, let me make sure I get this right. Resources. Let me make sure that is the right link here before we go any further. Yes, bit.ly/NAR settlement resources. So kind of some, I think, ground rules here today. Just if anybody doesn't already know me, I'm Nick Libert, broker owner of Exit Strategy Realty in Chicago, Illinois. I've been in the real estate business for almost 26 years now, 700 plus transactions under my belt personally. I own and operate Exit Strategy Realty, as I said, serving over 250 agents across Chicagoland. Been part of this brand for 16 years. This is a brand agnostic webinar. This is an industry specific webinar. We are going to have a consumer webinar at 4 p.m. So the opportunity there is, if consumers have questions, they can get on that webinar at 4 p.m. We are recording this session. We are recording the 4 p.m. session. I am hoping that all of you are already getting resources from your brokerage, whether that be at the local or the national level. At our company at Exit, I know Kim is on from another Exit Realty office. There's some of my agents on. We had an office specific Zoom at 12 p.m. that is internal to us with some of the things that we are going to be doing. All of us were, again, thrown for a loop on Friday. I think, though, this is an opportunity for us as an industry to grow. And if you didn't already see it, there's a video out. I'm going to go ahead and put the link into that. Don't play it now. You can play it later if you want to. That's probably maybe part of the reason how you found us here today. But there is a blog and a resource link that I just got. There's also going to be this video that I put in the chat here from me. And basically it's like, hey, how did we get here? What is going on? And so that video is meant for everybody. You can feel free to share it with your clients. You may have something better that you're putting out, or that your client is putting out there, or that your firm is putting out there. So this is by no means a slam on anybody else, but I believe that we have to get in front of this situation as an industry. We have to get in front of this situation with our clients. And so what do we need to do? We need to make sure that our clients have every piece of information possible out there. So that resource library is going to continue to grow. I am sure that you're going to have your own resources from your firm. But we have an opportunity here to really, I think, hone in on our value proposition and make sure that moving forward, we do a couple different things. So I am going to talk quite a bit at the beginning. I do have some questions that people have already submitted through my text code, which is 815-542-3781. Again, that's 815-542-3781. I'm going to put that in the chat as well. And then if you want to text a question in that way, you can. Obviously, you can also put it in the chat, but I know I missed at least one question on our chat from our office. I do have a friend that's a lender on, my friend Marla. She's traveling all around the world while she's doing loans. Marla and I have done loans together, good Lord, for probably 15 years together now. Excuse me. While this is a realtor Zoom, I have to tell you, I'm glad Marla's on, because our partners in this moving forward and getting through this are going to be our lenders, because we know that I think it's almost 90% of transactions involve a lender. And so our lenders are going to have to be part of this conversation of who's going to pay us. Our value proposition as an industry has not changed, and if anything, it may strengthen through this. Our value proposition to consumers, while it hasn't changed, the question of compensation is altered. It hasn't changed, it's altered. And what I mean by that is we're going to have better and more transparent upfront conversations with both our buyers and sellers as to how we get paid. So I've been in the business, as I mentioned to you, 26 years. My firm's done over 10,000 transactions across Chicagoland. You all have done a lot of good things in your careers. The way that I put it in that video that I sent you the link to is that this is kind of like what my stepdad has faced in the automotive industry. He built cars, repaired cars, helped a lot of people over the years do that. He was a CDL semi-truck driver. And now I look at that industry, and now they got EVs. I just transitioned from a internal combustion engine or ICE vehicle to a EV last fall. And I look at it and I go, well, does all the work that my stepdad put into the automotive industry become negated because we've decided, some of us, that EVs are better? Absolutely not. Our value doesn't go backwards. We did nothing as an industry, and most of us personally, wrong by the way that we operated and were compensated in the past. But moving forward, we have the opportunity as an industry to do better. And so that is going to mean some pivots. And number one, the transparency. I don't believe that. I don't know most of you on this Zoom. I know a few of you. I know a few of you very well. Edna, Marla, Darian, Kim, even though we're not at the same office, we're at the same brand. We've been around each other for many years. Some of you are strangers to me, but hopefully not for long. Hopefully we'll connect on LinkedIn and Instagram and all that good stuff, TikTok, even though I really don't know how to use it, all that stuff soon. We have to be transparent. We have to be extremely aware of what our value is and articulate that. And moving forward, we have to have a discussion and documentation of how we're going to get paid. Some of the questions that I've already gotten are, what's going to go on with NAR? And let me say this. The National Association of Realtors has done a lot of stuff wrong. A lot of stuff wrong. We all know that. They've had messes from the top. They've had CEOs and presidents doing weird stuff, lawsuits, not even related to commissions. But the bottom line is, this is by far the largest trade organization for real estate agents. They own the trademark to the name Realtor. They have items of value for you and data for you that no one else has. Let's remember, NAR, the local and the state boards of realtors are directly connected in most cases to our local MLS. The MLS isn't going away, even though there's a field in the MLS that's going away. What's the field in the MLS that's going away per this 108-page document that I had the pleasure of canceling the trip to a bachelor party over the weekend and actually reading through line by line all 108 pages. It was very boring. You don't have to do it, I don't think. That compensation field, that co-op compensation field is going away in the MLS. But in reality, for the vast majority of us, it should have always, in my opinion, been this way, commissions have always been negotiable. What was offered to the buyer's agent by the seller's agent, offered to the buyer's brokerage by the seller's brokerage, has always been negotiable, a little bit of a question mark. It may have said something in the MLS, but what ended up getting put in the MLS was always a little bit of a question mark. I used to have an agent at my firm. Now, he doesn't work with me anymore, but we're still friends, that would put $1 in, because you had to put something in there until recently. He had to put $1 in there. So I get calls all the time. My God, your agent's terrible. He's only offering $1 cooperative compensation. I worked with an agent at another, when I was at Keller Williams. I'm at Exit now, been here for 16 years, but I was at Keller Williams for 3 years. And as a team leader and managing broker, and I had an agent there that would do 4% buyer broker agreements. They would get 4% commission, 2.5%, 3% from the other side, whatever was being offered, plus an additional amount because they were doing, hopefully, we're doing such a great job for the consumer. So commissions have always been negotiable. The buyer agent fee has always been a little bit of a question mark. What this now does, this settlement, by the way, please note the word proposed is still in there. Not all parties have signed off on this yet, but most likely they will. And so what we have an industry have to do is start to get those documents together that will do what? Number one, as a buyer's agent, inform our buyer how professional realtors get paid and what are the options in how we're going to get paid. Is the buyer going to have to pay us? Are we looking to the seller? If the seller is not offering, we're coming back to the buyer. Can the lender be involved? Can the lender, and when I say lender, not that poor, nice loan officer that's gotten beaten up even worse than us over the last 24 months, because we still had some cash transactions, those of us that were lucky to. Poor Marla, there are no cash transactions for mortgage lenders. So they got the brunt of it even worse than we did the last 24 months with these interest rates. Now we're at the bottom of the barrel because now we're dealing with this mess. But we're going to get through it. But we have to figure out who is going to pay the buyer's agent. What I want to strongly encourage you all to do, and I'm going to have some videos out there that maybe you want to share, or maybe you're going to make a better version, or hopefully your brokerage is going to make a better version of this. What I'm going to say to my sellers is the following. We have to realize that in most cases, the buyer is coming in at a weaker financial position than the seller. Why is that? We're all in the business of real estate. I'm filming this today from my home office, at my house, not the fanciest place in the world, but pretty decent. I paid for it with my commissions and my exit realty residual bonuses. This process appreciated in value. I paid down on the mortgage note. I actually was lucky enough back when the market was great to pay this place off. All of our clients as sellers have hopefully paid down on their mortgage. This is not 2008 and 9 when nobody was paying. They paid down on their mortgage, and hopefully, if they bought right, we helped them do that. So they've appreciated value. And so they are at a position then, therefore, to have a little bit of equity, hopefully. They're in a financial position where they're not coughing up the down payment. Who's coughing up the down payment? The buyer. Whether that down payment is $500 or $50,000 or 50% down or 5% or whatever that number is going to be, that buyer has closing costs, down payment, prepaids. Half the time they're scared witless because this is the biggest thing they've ever done. Why am I, as a seller's agent or a seller, going to automatically position myself to go, no, we're not paying. We're not paying. That automatically closes the door to some opportunities to have a ready, willing, and able buyer in your property. And that's how I'm going to phrase it to my sellers. Let's understand up front that professional realtors have to get paid and that they are commission only. The vast majority of us. I was at, and I said this to my agents at noon today, I was at a company way back in the day. So I started out at Coldwell Banker from 1998 to 2001, was a top producer for them. Thought I knew everything, left and started my own company. I did not. But along that journey, and then I ended up at Keller Williams, and then for the last 16 years at Exit, I discovered at one point there was a company called Home Touch. Now, this is before most of you maybe were in the business. And this little company was Chicago based, and they were a startup. They were an internet startup. And they said, we're going to represent only buyers. That was the company's first problem. We're going to represent only buyers. And we're going to pay our agents a salary. And then we're going to collect the commissions. We're going to somehow make this work so the agents are on salary, and that buyer doesn't have to worry about it, that we're trying to just get a commission. But what happened? The agents were real lazy. They didn't prospect. I'm not 100% sure they did their job real great. I was an agent for them. I was recruited for them. That's how I got my Illinois license. I got my ABR designation, and they found me through that. And they said, we want buyer broker agents like yourself. And so I've been at a company very briefly because Home Touch didn't last long, and I didn't last long at that company because I like to work with listings and buyers. But what happened was we found out that that type of compensation isn't really the best option either. So commission is most likely going to be the way we're also going to get paid. So how are we going to document that? That's one question. One of the things that I know is going to come up today, and I'm looking forward to answering some of the things I've already got by that text number. One of those things that I'm going to address, at least from my brokerage, is what is your relationship with NAR or NAR, the National Association of Realtors, moving forward? I will be blunt. They didn't do us that great of a job, right? They've had a lot of mess, notwithstanding this lawsuit. That being said, the National Association of Realtors is not only the largest trade organization, that's how you get your all your designations, which I'm going to encourage you strongly to get some more designations. Get the ABR designation if you haven't already. It is my favorite price, free 99, free through the National Association of Realtors right now. Why I believe and will be, for my firm at least, continuing the National Association of Realtors. What else is out there? You've got Mario Umansky. I've never met him in person, but met some other people from the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I'm a reality TV fan, for those of you guys that don't know me. He's got this great idea. We're going to do a different one. We're going to go and start a different association. NAR did a terrible job. NAR did a lot wrong. But have you ever been sued? Unfortunately, hopefully not too many people raise their hand. I have. It ain't fun. You get a lawyer, you start paying a lot of money, and everybody is looking for your pockets. They're looking in your pocketbook. So NAR got sued along with some other big brokerages. And what happened was NAR went and got the best attorneys they could, better than I could afford, and they lost. They lost. And this is the settlement, the proposed settlement agreement. What were NAR's other options? Well, if you read through not the 108-page document, but the little PDF that NAR sent out, what happened? What did they say their other options were? They could file bankruptcy. There was an option. They could go under. They could continue on and continue to get sued more and more. They could say, hey, we've done it this way so long, like the internal combustion engine conversation. We did it this way so long. We think we've done a decent job as an industry, but we can do better and we can do things a little differently. And here's what we're going to do moving forward. So NAR, I think we need to, as an industry, say, you screwed up a lot, but this is where the vast majority of resources, data, designations, information, and the trademark realtor come from. Let's just get better. Let's let NAR get better. I believe NAR should be more transparent with us in where our money goes. I believe NAR needs to have a more transparent process in the way that they elect their leaders. This is not a slam on anybody that's at NAR. I've been on the board of Illinois Realtors for a term, 3 terms on the board of Chicago Association of Realtors. These organizations, these associations have value. You may not love them. I love some of the people on them. Don't like them all, but love some of the people on them. But moving forward, we have to hold NAR, IR, CAR, these are the memberships you are, but your state and local boards accountable. They've got to have more transparency now. They pick people, but these are your people. And if you want to go and try to save a couple bucks by getting out of NAR and the local associations, you first and foremost are going to start lose access to designations, data, etc. If you are not already using RPR, Realtors Property Resource, how many of you guys on here? There are not that many of us. This thing was filled up on my Eventbrite, but there's 11 of us on here for now. We know a lot of people are going to watch the recording later. We're going to send it out. It's going to be all over my YouTube channel. Connect with me on social media if we're not already connected. If you do not already have the Realtors Property Resource, RPR app, and the Realtors Property Resource, RPR information on your desktop and laptop, get it now. This is not an RPR training, but I'm happy to have a lot of them moving forward. Find out who your local certified trainers in RPR, Realtors Property Resource, are, because you need all that data. Massive amounts of data. Maybe if we have time, I'll show you a couple things. In Chicago, In the city of Chicago, there are only 2 RPR, Realtors Property Resource Certified Trainers. You're unfortunately stuck in looking at one of them. But I am willing to do nationwide training on every single module because I've taken every single one of them and certified to train every single one of them, because that data is going to be some of the stuff you need to turn around and say to these buyers and sellers who are so confused, And I want to show you why they are confused right now. These poor folks, I almost feel as bad for them as I do for us. Look at this. CNN, not doing us any favors. The 6% commission on buying or selling a home is gone. I don't recall the last time it was there specifically for me. I negotiate my commissions, I articulate my value, and I give my clients options. But according to CNN, we were all getting 6%. We're all greedy, you know what's, and this seismic settlement is going to make it cheaper. No, it's not. It's going to make it more transparent that it's negotiable and who gets paid and how. That's all that's going to change. That's all that's going to change. But you've got data like this out there, or not data, misinformation out there like this that is skewing the conversation. So Friday, this came down. Saturday, as luck would have it, I have my first listing appointment of March. And I'm like, oh, great. And of course, this is a friend and a client of mine that is well-read. So they're like, are we going to talk about commission? It's like, of course we're going to talk about commission because everybody's so confused. So you need to start by making a video like I did, or just share mine. So I don't know who that orange man is, but he had some decent commentary. You can throw that out there. And here's the settlement, here's the PDF, and here's this stuff. But I have value, and I need to get paid when I do my job. So my firm is going to stay with NAR and the local and the state boards. I would recommend you do the same, but you can do whatever the heck you want. I would strongly recommend you get your ABR if you don't already have the accredited buyer representative designation, because it's free for the time being. And then as a follow-up, because you have to take one elective for that, I would hope you take the MRP, the Military Relocation Professional, because that is the exact type of person that needs you. Somebody that's a person of service, that has a specific loan type, VA, or the option to have VA, and that we want to help these folks buy and sell property. Do yourself a favor. Take the time now while we have it, because I don't know if anybody besides me is less busy than we were in 2022 or 2021, right? I have never made more money than I did in 2021 as a realtor. I've had some years that were great, and I've had some years that were famine. So my job as a coach is to make sure my agents don't have famine years as much as possible, that we get this yo-yo as less of a yo-yo and more as an upswing. But we all have to, as agents, present our value to the consumer. And the more designations you can get, I call it the alphabet soup behind my name. I mean, you guys can see the edge of it. I don't have every designation, but I got a lot. And I love learning. You need to start love learning if you've fallen out of love with it. And I'm going to say the same thing to all of you that I said to my agents earlier, and I got everybody gathered a little bit. And I said, no offense to anybody. Respect everything you've done so far. However, if this is the time for you to step out of the industry, what's your exit strategy? Pun intended for on my firm's name. If your exit strategy is this is the time to go into a referral company or holding company, God bless you. Thank you for noticing that you may need to step out, because we all otherwise have to step up, don't we? We all have to step up. We did nothing wrong, the vast majority of us, but we can do better, and we have to do things different and smarter. So if you don't want to get some designations behind your name, that's okay. But the more you can do to say to your client, I have poured into my career as a realtor. I poured into my career, and here are my credentials, and here are my items of value. So guys, you've got the link to this. At the bare minimum, you should be able to say to the client, here are the things, the potential things that I'm going to do for you as a seller's agent. There's 179 potential things. Doesn't mean we're going to necessarily run into all of these, or you're going to want all of these, or I'm going to want to do all of these, or you're going to be willing to pay me to do all these. But here they are as a seller, 179 of them. You guys all have access to this. All of it is unbranded, nothing to do with exit. There are a few things in that folder that say my name or exit on it. That's not one of them. 105 potential buyer agent tasks. Doesn't mean every transaction is going to be like that, but a lot of them will. What am I doing for you as a client? It's a really good reminder of what we're supposed to be here for. So if you're not doing the basics to get information in front of your consumers, how are you going to ask them for the commission? What are you putting in front of them? What's your value proposition? You guys, we all have to start doing a better job of explaining that, a better job of articulating our value. I do want to, we're already 26 minutes into this. I do want to answer a couple other questions that I got by text in advance. So I want to go ahead and look at these right now real quick. All right. So one of these is, so we talked about NAR already. A lot of us, some of us, like for example, in Chicagoland, we have the private listing network, PLN. I can't stand that thing. Cannot stand that thing. I think it's discriminatory. I feel like everybody should have, if the property's on the market, it should be fully on the market. That being said, I lost that battle a long time ago. I didn't get anywhere trying to get rid of that thing. So the private listing network is a way that some people over the weekend decided, oh, well, if I can't put offers of compensation on the MLS, because that line item is going to go away, can I put it in private listing remarks or private broker remarks, agent remarks that don't show up to the anybody else? No, you can't. That's the whole point of this 108-page document, is that field goes away. It goes away entirely. So does that mean the seller's agent isn't going to be able to have that conversation with the buyer's agent? No, not at all. It's just not going to be automatically in the MLS. So what do we have to do as seller's agent? Have those conversations with our seller. And most of the listing agreements, at least, and that's a dangerous generalization. The first three letters in assumption are, well, we don't need to spell them out, but you know what that is. I don't want to make assumptions. However, a lot of our local boards have already caught up, and this goes back to the value of being a part of a board. You don't have a board, you're trying to draft these contracts on your own. Good luck. You need to, as an agent, make sure that your brokerage has the updated forms, because most of the local associations have already figured out this something was coming, or they needed to adjust their forms. And so it now says in a lot of them, like Chicago Association of Realtors, the Illinois Realtors, the other forms, the listing contract says, Mr. or Mrs. Seller or Miss Seller and this brokerage have decided on a total commission of X. And of that X, Y is going to a buyer's agent, if involved. Y is going to a buyer's agent. So it breaks it down, or it should, if your board hasn't woken up and caught up yet. So that's one thing that we know. A buyer's agent is going to, effective in July. Now remember, nothing over the weekend changed on the existing deals you're already doing. One of the agents that works at my office asked a great question. They said, well, do I need to go to and change any forms with my existing sellers, at least at my brokerage and in my market? No, not today. There's no change in the forms today. On the buyer side, if you don't already have a buyer broker agreement, you need to really quickly get one, because they are going to, as of July, per this proposed settlement. By the way, I'm waving a book in the air. I just used a binder, because we're all on a budget right now, aren't we? I used a binder to put all this documentation in this 108 pages, but it's from one of the coaching programs I'm a part of that I'm a student of. So ignore that cover. That is not from NAR. But if you don't already have a buyer broker agreement with every single one of your buyers, you're going to want to get one of those right away. And look to your local board, look to your brokerage. And what you're going to want to do with that buyer agency agreement is explain to your buyer, hopefully we're going to be able to get the seller to pay this. But if not, you and I need to come to an agreement that I'm worth value and I got to get paid somewhere. So I said that I would stop talking about 30 minutes in. We are at the 30-minute mark. I would love to see what questions you guys have. So let's start it off. Anybody, I don't see anything in the chat, but I also haven't looked very closely at the chat. Does anybody want to turn their mic off and ask me a question?
Hi, Nick. Thank you for hosting the Zoom.
Absolutely, Doris.
I had a quick question about the broker-to-broker compensation agreement. I've heard some mixed chatter about the appropriateness of using that in addition to the sales contract, whether it violates some ethical limits or not.
So that's a great question. Number one, so let's think of it this way in terms of what it says in this proposed settlement. Remember, every single one of us is going to have to go check with our designated managing broker, whatever they call that in your area, and your brokerage to say, is my brokerage asking me something, or does my brokerage have a document? Here's how I'm handling an exit strategy. Every buyer and buyer's agent has to have a buyer brokerage agreement with an agreement there's going to be compensation paid, and here's what it is. And if the seller is not offering it to me, I'm going to be looking to the buyer or the buyer's lender or comment. We're going to figure this out, but there's a dollar amount. There is going to be a form, we believe, depending on what board you're a part of, depending on what your brokerage has, that is, as Doris said, going to be a broker to broker compensation agreement saying this is what the seller is offering up front, if anything. We think there's going to be something there that could be a document coming from the seller side. But realistically, what's going to happen, Doris, is because our industry is independent contractors, most of us, and there's a various levels of competency. I'm saying that nice. That there's going to be sellers agents that haven't gotten that document or are not going to use that document. I want to pick up the phone or send it to, actually, smartest thing would be to send a text or an email saying, what compensation are you offering? Because it's not in the MLS. So there's no violation of any sort of disagreement or anything in the code of ethics or anything out there that says I can't pick up the phone, or smarter, have a text or an email. Why is that smarter? Because there's a printout you can do that's saying, what are you offering? What are you offering? It's not in the MLS anymore as of July. And I don't know when that field's going to disappear for each one of our local MLSs, but it's going to go away. It's going to go bye-bye soon. When that does, and even before it does, you might want to be smart and pick up the phone or get that text or email out. Because here's what scares me, guys, is that there's going to be some agents that think they're slick and are like, oh, well, I just read this agreement. Most of them haven't read it. I just read this agreement, and it says that I can't offer a co-op compensation in the MLS. So it's gone now, even though it's still I haven't updated the MLS yet, but I'm no longer offering compensation. Doris is like, I'm thinking that too. I bet you some sneaky, whats are going to try that. Good luck to them. And this goes back to the whole structure of NAR and the local associations. I want to be able to drag that person in front of grievance or professional standards, but so that we got to stay members of an association to do that, right? Because the state's not going to want to mess with this kind of stuff. The state, your state regulators aren't going to. That's not what they're going to be focused on. You need to, as a buyer's agent, have that conversation, get it in writing. There is nothing wrong with getting something in writing. It's just not going to come from the MLS. And if those two documents, your buyer brokerage agreement and the document you get or you work out with the seller's agent saying, I'm going to get XYZ, if those two numbers don't match, you have to figure out, it's your responsibility as the buyer's agent to figure out how you are going to get paid the difference, if you're going to get paid the difference. So I'm just going to throw out some numbers there. And this is probably why I got some text messages from people like, ooh, you're crazy to do these public things, this early on. I'm like, well, what then all our consumers and our agents are going to be lost. I'd rather do this and say some things that quite frankly may later on be changed because the rules changed or something else. I'd rather get this out there for now. If the seller's agent, and Darian, I do see your hand up. If the seller's agent is offering me, let's throw a number out there, 2%. And my buyer broker agreement, because I'm such a great agent, said I was going to get 3%. That difference of 1%, where does that come from? Do I look to my buyer? Oh, I don't know. Let's go back to that conversation we had about the buyer's going to be most likely in a lesser position than the seller. So do I eat it? I still got to eat, right? I still got to eat. So I'm not necessarily gonna want to eat it later. Do we go to poor Marla and the rest of the lenders out there and go, whoa, can you guys, can the bank allow this? Can the bank allow this to be paid from a credit? Do we negotiate a credit in? See, this is where the sellers aren't going to get away with, oh my gosh, I don't have to pay a buyer's agent anymore. Well, if you didn't offer it, now we're going to ask for a credit. So this nasty little article from CNN is wrong about the 6% going away. It never was a set fee, but you're not automatically just going to get rid of the fee, or whatever that fee is, right? So get everything in writing. Get everything in writing, get it signed, both on the buyer side and the seller side, and realize when there's going to be a variance between what you and your buyer agreed to and what the seller's side is offering, somebody's going to have to figure out that gap. So Doris, that was a long answer, but I do not believe that there's anything that's going to preclude you from having that conversation and getting something in writing. Darian, you had a question, sir.
Hey, Nick. Yeah, I think we may have touched on this a little bit in our 12 o'clock, but at what point are we, so we get the buyer broker agreement signed. At what point are we reaching out to the listing agent to determine the compensation? Are we doing that before a showing? So we get a buyer agreement signed, and the client wants to see a property. Are we doing that before the showing? Are we doing that after the showing? Are we doing it at the point of or prior to submitting an offer? Like what, I mean, ideally, of course, we want to be proactive about it, but how proactive do we want to be to what, obviously we don't want to run the risk of compromising our buyer client, but at the same time, right, we need to be paid. So at what point are we, I guess, trying to figure out what the compensation is being offered?
That is a Darian, great question. We touched on it, but I think that it's great that you asked it because I think this needs to get out to everybody. It needs to get out to the consumers as well. So maybe I'll touch base on this again at 4 o'clock Central with the consumer Zoom. My answer to that is, so let's think about it this way. The buyer side, I am even in the terms of the settlement, you as a buyer broker need to have that buyer broker agreement. You want to have that before you ever show the first property, because you and your buyer need to be on the same page, right? Should have always kind of been like that. Should always kind of been like that. But now it's going to have to be like that. That is part of this settlement, that we as buyer brokers have to have that buyer broker agreement and that compensation figured out in terms of what that amount is agreed to between me and the buyer. Now, the seller side, that documentation that's going to come out, that documentation coming out from the seller side. And Darian, you're going to shoot me for this. Can you repeat your question again? Because I want to make sure I formed the answer correctly. Go ahead. Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, my basic question is at what point, so once we have the buyer broker agreement signed and our terms or compensation is agreed upon with our buyer, at what point are we then reaching out to the listing agent to determine what it is they are offering in terms of compensation?
So, okay, thank you for the reminder. So the seller side, as you as the buyer's agent, you should, because remember, it's going to be gone off the MLS. So you're flying blind. You should do that before you set up the showing. You should do that before you set up the showing. Because here now, there's going to be, that's my opinion. There's going to be some people that say, well, you should just set up the showing. Time is of the essence. You want to get your client in there. But you've got to know that landscape before you open the front door. Because here's why. If that's a VA loan, we talked about this at noon in our internal Zoom. If it's a VA loan at this point, it's only 4% total credits that are allowed at this point. I think maybe that's going to change, but because where's the money going to come from? These buyer agent commissions, but 4% for VA loan credit, buyer side credit. 6% for FHA. Marla, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But those are the maximum amount. So if I want to open the door to a property for my client, I need to know, in my opinion, up front, before I step foot in that door with my client, does this property, do we need to start mentally thinking, if this property works for my client, how am I going to get paid? And it's not that I'm so focused on myself. I need to make sure that this property works for my client, and that they're able to afford, someone's able to afford. How the heck am I going to get paid? Because the bottom line is, Darian, your question is so on point, because if we don't do this work up front and we open up that door and our client gets so excited about this property, what happens then? Who gets, how am I going to get paid? Or are we going to put ourselves in a position that, well, my buyer really liked this property, but they can't afford to pay me, and there's not enough credits there, and the seller's not willing to pay, so I'm left holding the bag, a bag full of nothing, right? Bag full of nothing. So buyer agreement signed, and Doris, I see you're about to have another question. I'm glad. Buyer agreement signed up front before I ever step foot in the property or set up that first showing. And as I set that showing up, I want to get my compensation in writing, in my opinion, in writing from the seller side agent, so I know the landscape for my buyer. I hope that, for the time being, that's my answer. Doris, you had a question?
Yeah, your answer to Darian's question, and that was a great question, by the way, Darian. It makes me wonder what this does with procuring costs. If there is no seller agent, if there is no offered compensation, and you do have a buyer's agreement in place, but let's say that buyer goes around you to avoid paying commission or closes with the inability to pay commission, what happens? What path does an agent have to recoup funds?
Doris, you stumped me. Well, let's think of it this way. Procuring cause has always been the procuring cause isn't going to change. So the way we determine procuring cause, I don't believe will change, because the definition of procuring cause isn't changing. The question is, what agreement are we following to get paid? If that buyer can't afford to pay me under the structure that's been negotiated, I'm going to have to, if I choose to, try to collect based on that buyer broker agreement. That's going to be the controlling document. Doris, I think you had a follow-up to that. Yes.
No, thank you for answering that. That sounds horrible though, like as a prospect, but I understand it.
Yeah, it's not a great answer. That's the answer. So, and this goes back to, one of my agents, we had a situation that came up recently that they were not paid per that we had an agreement in place on something, we weren't paid, and you and your office need to, I think, kind of be braced for. Doris hit the nail on the head. Like, this is going to come up at some point. I hope it doesn't come up a lot, but E&O insurance, we always need a good E&O insurance policy. We also need a good, solid buyer agency agreement that kind of like sees this potential coming. We don't want to think that our clients are going to walk around us. We don't want to think that our clients and us are not going to be able to figure out and negotiate properly to get us paid. However, as it always is in life happens. Life is lifing. So, I have a very cheap law degree on the wall. I always joke it's the law degree from Sears, because I went to law school and clearly didn't do well, because otherwise I'd be a lawyer. But did pass the Illinois bar. I just don't practice. I believe that your firm is going to have better buyer broker agreements, and you're going to kind of have a lawyer on speed dial just in case something happens, so that there is the potential to collect if we have to. that being said, you know, you can't squeeze what was that? Can't squeeze blood out of a turnip or whatever that saying is. If that buyer rolls in there and has nothing left, it's like, and also, do you know how much it costs? Going back to the, did NAR do us wrong? Well, they didn't do us great, but it costs so much money to defend or be on the offense in a lawsuit. You know, how much money is there, A, to collect, but B, how much is it going to cost you to collect? And that goes back to, you know, the consumer can't get wrapped up into mediation arbitration, but other agencies can. So if somebody does us wrong and is not the consumer, but it's the other side of the brokerage transactions, the other brokerage, guess what? Because we're members of NAR, the state association, or NAR, state association, and the local association, guess what? We have these channels that are built in, professional standards, grievance, arbitration, mediation, that we can go through and try to get the money that we were owed if there's another brokerage, an agreement there involved. If the situation that Doris brings up sadly comes into play for someone, that the buyer skirted around us, or more likely, the buyer didn't skirt around us. We did our job, our buyer worked through us, and there's just somehow that the money wasn't there. Maybe, God forbid, you know, Marla's probably still on the line. Maybe in the middle of the transaction, the lenders change something, and you're like, oh my gosh, and that could happen, guys. Where all of a sudden the underwriter goes, ooh, wait, 6% credit. Ooh, we only want to do 4. What happens? Who gets the money? How do we get the money? That is what's going to keep me up at night. But we cannot. Wayne Beals, who's not on this Zoom, but he was on the noon Zoom. Wayne Beals is a great agent at our office. He used to own his own small independent brokerage. He merged into mine just the same way that I decided to become part of something bigger than myself in a franchise environment, because I knew that scary stuff like this might happen someday. Wayne goes, the last thing we need to do right now is be greedy. We got egg on our faces from this garbage, this stuff. So we don't need to be greedy. We need to be smart and articulate our value, be transparent. We have to have documentation, and we have to provide more value. We have to make sure that we're providing maximum value. All right. I do see, let's see a question.
I have a question.
Oh, yes, Edna.
Does these rules apply to rentals as well? Because I've noticed that some of these rental brokers are, they're not doing like 50% of the rents. They're doing $200, $300, $400 on a $1,400. So does this apply to the rental as well?
So that is not great, Edna. Great question. That is not 100% fully spelled out yet. Here's what I know though. If the co-op compensation is going, remember, this is a realtor-wide settlement. So if the MLS is taking it out of the buyers and sellers, most likely in most local boards is going to go away. That field's going to go away on the rental side too. Think of it this way. In New York, in the city of New York, I have friends that are real estate agents there. A leasing agent gets paid by who? The tenant. They get paid by the tenant in most cases. Here in Chicago, who do we get paid by? The landlord in most cases. So if that blank goes away, what's going to happen is it's going to be the same process. I have an agreement with my tenant that I'm worth blank. And if I don't get blank from that landlord and that landlord's agency, I need to come to you as the tenant. So that dollar amount, it could be $500, could be $5,000, it could be 5% of the lease. We don't know, because that field, that co-op compensation field, is most likely going away for the rentals as well. So it goes back to, again, what is my value? What is my value? I'm going to drive them around in my car. I'm going to get the keys to the place. That is, man, if that is your value proposition, good luck. You're probably time to look for an exit strategy, because that's not our value. Our value is finding them not only the great place, negotiating the right deal, getting all the paperwork in order, keeping this stuff moving after the transaction is done. Utilities, transfer fees, elevator, rules, regulations, all of this stuff that, quite frankly, some of us, myself included, from time to time, have dropped the ball on in the past. So, Edna, great question. The answer is it's probably going to be the exact same in most areas as it's going to be on buyers and sellers. We have to articulate our value proposition, have an agreement with our client as to what our value is worth, dollar or percentage wise. And if the other side is not willing to pay us, I have to come back to you, Mr. Miss or Ms. Client.
Thank you.
Welcome. All right, so we're gonna absolutely need to be done at 3 o'clock Central because my bladder only can hold things for so long. But also this is an ongoing conversation. I do not see any other questions in the chat. I am gonna look on my cell phone and see if there is a, hold on one second. No other questions in the text messages either. Guys, what other questions do you guys have for me that I can hopefully answer in the next couple minutes? Well, this has been a treat. I really appreciate you guys. Let me give you a couple resources. If you did not already, connect with me on social media. I'm the same handle everywhere, at Nick Libert. That's at NICKLIB as in boy, ERT. You can also text me using this code. If you text my last name, LIB as in boy, ERT, to the number 85377. I'm going to put this in the chat as well. If you text LIBERT to the number 85377, you're going to get my digital business card, all my items of value. You can start registering for upcoming events. I am committed to doing RPR, Realtors Property Resource webinars. I'm a Brian Buffini certified mentor. So if you guys need to get into maybe a training on that, I am an open book and I am open to helping people regardless of your brand affiliation. Because I realize this much, guys, I'm not perfect. But I realize there are some brokerages that are not going to step up to the plate. Obviously, I'd love to work with you. If you want to come to Exit, talk to me. If you do not, I'm still gonna be your buddy because we're all in this together. This is a mess, and we gotta stick together. Those of us that are gonna stick in this business and do better and do good. Guys, thank you so much for being here. This has been recorded. It will be up on my YouTube channel by tonight. I will see you all soon. Thank you for being a realtor, and thank you for being my new friend if I don't already have connections with you. Talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.